This is Mac Thornberry. One of the best parts of my job is the remarkable people I get to know. One of them is Peggy Harris from Vernon, Texas. Peggy was a World War II bride, and her husband, Billie D. Harris, was a pilot whose plane went down near a small village in France. He did not eject, but stayed in the plane to fly it away from the people in the village. A TV network told their story for D-Day last year, and took a shot or two at Congress and at me. Peggy wanted to set the record straight. As you'll see when you watch her story, she's just that kind of woman. My part in this story is very small, but Peggy and Billie Harris's love for each other, their love for our country, and their personal sacrifices are huge. This is a beautiful and inspirational true story of commitment, courage, and ordinary people living extraordinary lives. They truly are our greatest generation.
My name is Peggy Harris, Mrs. Billie D. Harris. I was born and grew up in Vernon, Texas. And there was an opening in the production control office, so I took that job. Billie's father was assistant manager of propeller department there. Soon after I came there, he wanted me to write to his son, who was a student pilot, and I let him know that I did not write to men I didn't know, and particularly to servicemen. So I began to get letters from Billie. I was a little fearful of this man that hadn't seen me, but he thought I was okay. So when he came on leave, all of a sudden the door to the airplane opened and there was Billie Harris saying, "Hello, Peggy." And that was about it.
So y'all got married?
He went back to the service and was transferred to Florida. He sent me money to come, and we were supposed to have 2 weeks leave prior to his going overseas. A shipload of our pilots who were to go overseas were off the coast of Florida, and a German U-boat fired on it, sank it. All of the men were either killed or badly wounded. Billie said they called them up with full gear, and they didn't know whether they were going or going to be able to stand down. So when they called us and told us that our husbands would not be coming back, but we would not tell that our husbands had left the United States, not until we heard that they were safely at their destination. When the telegram came, the moment I opened it, I went to pieces, but after a while I looked at it again, and then I went down to the telegraph office and brought with me letters from Billie that were written after the date of the telegram. The telegram said missing July 7. And I had letters, handwritten letters dated after that. The moment I opened it, I went to pieces, and the telegram said missing July 7. And I had letters, handwritten letters dated after that. So they said they'd look into it, and later they came up with missing in action July 17. Actually, I had a news release from Supreme Headquarters in Allied France, and I took it to the Red Cross, and I said, help me find where he is. They said, we cannot afford to look into this because he will come home before we can get an answer. And after quite some time, I sent that release to Ed Gossett, who was our congressman in Washington, D.C., asked him to look into it, see what's happened. By this time, it's 1945. We learned that a lot of false reports are coming out of Berlin. But Berlin stamps killed in action and returns the inquiry. That isn't satisfactory. Nothing that would indicate they knew anything about Billie Harris, who he was, where he was, what had happened. So it was just a confusing mix-up. Alton Harvey, Billie's cousin, had heard about Billie, about dogfights and the medals that he had won, but he wanted to find Billie, and he too began searching. The officer in Oklahoma said for him to contact Arlington, where the records were now kept. He first got told that it would be 6 months. Records were so numerous, and they were so stored away, and they were so old, that they would have to go in and look for it, and it would take a long time. Just shortly after that, he got a telephone call from Arlington, Virginia, and they said, "You're not going to believe this. It's the strangest thing. Those records were pulled 6 months ago because a woman in France sent the money and asked that they be sent to her in France." I tell you, it was difficult putting pieces together. We had no idea what had really happened in France. We learned the name, and I wrote to them and thanked them for their burial of my husband. And they wrote back to me, really astounded that they had heard anything from the United States. And the mayor offered for us to come and for them to have ceremonies for us. So we decided to go. They had the huge flags, the veterans carrying the flags. And so a man came and said he was the man who ran to the plane, leaped on the wing. He saw Billie die. 2 or more of the young men who carried the casket to the grave were present. We didn't know the whole story. We didn't know the whole story until we were there. When we returned from France, my hometown newspaper was persistent. I did give them the story. I got a call. I asked where this call was coming from. It was coming from New York. And they're very interested in Billie's story. And they say they want to come to Vernon and interview and learn more. And they wanted to go to France, to Levant, and the original grave site, as well as to Normandy. In the evening, I was at a friend's summer house, about 1.5 miles from the cemetery. When the cemetery personnel call and say they have an advance of the movie that's going to be shown, would I like to come over and see it? The 3 of us went over to view the film. They had a segment in there about Mac Thornberry, which absolutely blew me away. I was stunned. I had no idea they were going to include something like this in the way they did it. I was so angry, and we wanted that deleted, that it was not true, it was not proper, it was not right. And they said they would come over immediately to see me. I was so angry and disturbed that I was shaking, and they wrapped me in a blanket, and I sat there 3 hours. They didn't come. And finally, at 11:30 at night, they came. I was dumbfounded. I was absolutely couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, "That is your story?" "Yes." I said, "I thought the story was Billie Harris." They said, "It is our duty as journalists to expose politicians." There was nothing more I could do. I was sitting there in France in a rural area, and they were putting this out all over the United States, virtually all over the world. They used me to get at Mac Thornberry, and they got at Mac Thornberry illegally. It was not right. Right there in France, I felt that Mac had been maligned and that I had been used. And for him to be maligned in any way was wrong. But for him to be maligned because of me really was a grief that broke my heart, to think that somebody like Mac Thornberry would be mean. Mac Thornberry and his lovely wife were here about a year ago, and I had an opportunity to say, "Mac, you don't know how I regret those words being put out." He's a man with a big heart, and he does more than he's required to do, and he cares about his constituency, each individual. For Mac to be able to do the great job that he does overall and still regard each one of us individually is the mark of a great statesman, really. Mac Thornberry couldn't have done more for me. I tell you, Mac Thornberry's doing a terrific job, and he has for years. So I hope he stays there as long as I live. In my book, Mac Thornberry's the man we need, and as long as he will serve, Mac Thornberry's my man.